OSullivan.
So we're going to move on now to a former Labour councillor, Amir Latif, he's from Cowley in Oxfordshire, who stepped down because of this, who quit the Labour Party because of this. Why do you think, Amir, it's so important for Keir Starmer to change his stance and to start calling for a ceasefire? What does that mean to Muslims like you?
Hi, good afternoon, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. I think it is imperative that Starmer, not only Starmer, but every person of good conscience and wanting international peace and justice does call for a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire. We've seen awful devastation, both beginning with an attack on killing innocent Israeli civilians, but also now the constant bombardment of innocent Palestinian civilians as well in the Gaza Strip. And we mustn't forget the absolute devastation that's being caused in Gaza. 2.2 million people under constant bombardment. We have over half of those are children. Many of them are now homeless. We must remember this is a population where 80% of them, before the events of recent weeks, were living on humanitarian aid in any case. So now to have quite so many people who are suffering and dying, it's just unconscionable that we would call for anything other than a ceasefire. There's two things to remember here. One is the importance of trying to bring an end to the current suffering, and that's why an immediate ceasefire is needed. The second thing really to remember is the importance of a long-term solution. Events have escalated since October the 7th, but we must remember that history didn't start on October the 7th. This is a conflict that's been going on.
I mean, this is often said, and it's a fair point. It's a very checkered and
Amazing that the Talk TV hosts are the ones being a little bit more charitable than anybody from the Labour right. You even whisper the words, well, what about what happened before October the 7th? And members on the Labour right will say, you're justifying terrorism. You're just trying to say that Israel deserved it. You had it coming, a la Kay Burley, right? At least when Kevin OSullivan says, well, it's a fair point. There were tensions in the region already. I wonder how they managed to radicalise all those people.
Let me ask you this, Amma. Let me ask you this. We can all go back 75 years of oppression. Everybody says that, but what we're talking.
I was trying to go forwards. Actually, I was trying to go forwards. Okay. What I was going to say was, if we want peace in the future, and what we should hope for that region is that every Israeli citizen and civilian can live with peace and hope, and every Palestinian civilian can live with peace and hope. The only way that's going to be brought about is through dialogue and through constructive dialogue and bringing peace about, and that is not going to continue.
Agreed, but that isn't going to happen now, Amma. 20 days ago, when Hamas crossed the border, invaded Israel, some of them by paraglider, and brutally butchered 1,400 innocent Israelis. And Keir Starmer came out and said, we stand with Israel and we stand by Israel's right to defend itself. Did you agree with him then?
I don't think Israel's right to defend itself is in question.
No, but did you agree with Keir Starmer?
I don't know why that question's being put to me in that way. Of course I did. There isn't any... no one has...
You know what I mean, right? Some people think that there is any kind of level of question over the idea that a sovereign state should be able to defend itself, right? Those two things, every single time. Israel has a right to defend itself. Do you condemn Hamas? Right? It's this narrativization of you continuing to try and essentially link the Palestinian cause to Hamas, and also link the committing of war crimes to the right for someone to defend themselves. Why don't we actually, get past these silly canards and actually look at the truth and the materiality of what's happening? But then, of course, then we might actually look and see that what Israel is doing is wrong.
Do you agree with it now?
I think the question really now that we're discussing is whether there's a collective punishment
it's not collective punishment. They're laying siege to an enemy. It is.
The siege is the collective punishment. Because they're not just sieging Hamas, they're sieging the entire population of Gaza. This has already been called out by international observers, right? We already know that this is against international humanitarian law, but we can't call them up to the ICC because Israel withdrew from the Rome Statute in 2002, right? That's why they get away with this stuff. Neither Israel nor the United States have signed up to the Rome Statute, so they can commit human rights violations and humanitarian law violations with complete impunity.
It isn't technically collective punishment because collective punishment is a war crime, and as things stand, Israel has not committed a war crime. This is
circular logic, right? By saying, well, they're not doing collective punishment because that's a war crime, and they've not done a war crime because that's collective punishment. No. They've done collective punishment by collectively punishing the entirety of Gaza by laying the siege that they have said that they are laying. They've been open about the denial of all of these things, right? Collectively punishing the entire population of Gaza and saying, well, until you give the hostages back, we will just make sure that all of your population starve, all of your people, all of your babies in your incubators die, right? This is literally collective punishment, saying we will blame the entirety of the Palestinians for Hamas, and we will hold them to ransom using the siege collectively to do so. That is literally just collective punishment. Like, how can you not see this, Kevin?
Laying siege to an enemy. If the enemy is Hamas and Hamas choose to situate themselves among their fellow people, among innocent Palestinian citizens, that's Hamas's fault, not Israel's.
Well, I'm glad that we can agree that collective punishment is a war crime, because actually that is what we're seeing.
Yes, which Israel under international law. But Ammar, Israel under international law. Don't keep talking when I'm talking. There's no point.
You're talking over him. He started talking, and then you immediately cut him off to try to talk over him. I can't believe these kind of people, right? This real kind of destiny brain where you talk over people, and then halfway through their answer, you get mad that they're not letting you talk over them. And also, like, Ammar is right. They are committing war crimes. It is collective punishment. You're just lying, Kevin, or just an idiot. Most likely the latter. I've watched enough of your content to know that you're a moron. But you're literally talking over a man who's explaining why you're wrong and refusing to let him answer. Because they literally are doing collective punishment right now. Even without the idea of, oh, well, right, they're using human shields. What we're not quibbling over the idea that in the situation where they use human shields, they're having to bomb civilian buildings to get rid of them, right? That's not what's on the table here. That's not technically a war crime. Like, they shouldn't do it. I don't think they should be doing it, but it's not actually a war crime in the way that the siege is a war crime or the forced transfer is a war crime, both of which they are already doing outside of the human shield stuff.
Israel, under international law, oh God,
answer a question, and then you're talking over me.
No. I'm trying to ask you a question. I'm trying to point.
I was trying to answer it.
Okay, Israel has not committed any war crimes so far, has it?
Well, I don't know. I think that is being brought into question.
Well, you just accused them of collective punishment.
No, they have. They literally have. Like, they just absolutely have. International observers have said so.
That's a war crime.
I said it's being brought into question. I think there is collective punishment going on.
You suspect? Okay.
The Gaza Strip is an area the size of the Isle of Wight, approximately. The Isle of Wight has about 150,000 people in it. The Gaza Strip has about 2.2 million people in it, over half of whom are under the age of 18. You know, this is
literally next to footage of them demolishing a residential tower block.
An area that already has had huge suffering, and there is collective punishment, and that's why we're seeing huge numbers.
Well, you're accusing Israel now of something it has not been found guilty of. You're accusing Israel of a war crime. It is not a war crime to lay. Can you let me finish the sentence ever? It is not a war crime.
I mean, I hate to be like, well, you started it, but you kind of did when you didn't let him answer your question. So. And again, all we're doing is just continually debating the existence of the war crimes that they clearly have committed, right? It's been over, just the forced transfer alone has been called a war crime already by international observers, independent international observers, right? Leave out the siege, leave out the bombing of civilian buildings. Just the forced transfer alone has already been called a war crime.
To lay siege to your enemy.
I think we'll have to agree to disagree on this.
No, it isn't a war crime. That's a fact. You can't disagree with that. That's a fact. Look, let me ask you this. Would you prefer right now Keir Starmer, who you clearly disapprove of, hence you've left...
This guy who knows nothing. He's saying it's a fact when there's just demonstrably the opposite. Just wandered into opposite land with this video.
Labour Party. Would you prefer that Jeremy Corbyn was the leader?
I don't think this is an issue of who's the current leader of the party. The issue is what position the leader of the party takes. And I
just had to do it. They couldn't go a single conversation about the Israel-Palestine conflict without mentioning jumbly crumbly concrete. Just couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it.
I think this is the problem that Keir Starmer has, in that I wouldn't frame this as a left versus right issue, a Muslim versus Jewish issue. This is a humanitarian rights issue. This is what we're seeing is killing of innocent civilians, and any good person of good conscience will want an end to that. And
By
that's
Hamas,
why
by Hamas, you mean, yeah?
And Israel, the Israeli government is also under constant bombardment of innocent civilians, and we should want an
It's retaliating. It's at war.
True, they killed our children, we killed their children. Two wrongs don't make a right. Jeez, he's literally out here saying, well, it's fine to kill Palestinian children because the Al-Qassam brigades killed Israeli children. Oh, great. I guess this guy subscribes to the judicial punishment system of Hammurabi then, I guess. An eye for an eye, I get. Go for it, whatever. International law be damned.
It's killing innocent civilians.
It's horrible. We all sympathise. We all weep for those poor innocent Palestinians who haven't.
But we just don't care enough to actually do something about it. He'll cry into his Murdoch paycheck.
Done anything wrong in the Gaza Strip, who are just trying to get by and they're getting killed. That is terrible. But it is Hamas's fault, and Israel is retaliating. And for the record, Israel has not committed any war crimes yet.
Yes, they have. Collective punishment, forced transfer, these are both war crimes. Simple as that. You just can't just make up the Geneva Conventions, like, on the fly, Kevin. They do have real meanings, you know. You can't just change them to suit whatever your geopolitical whims are. And again, there's, as we said before, you're trying to make it look like history started on October the 7th, when it did not.
Well, I think, as I say, we've been over this point. We'll have to agree to disagree on that. But the point I was trying to make... Well, no,
you can't disagree because it's a fact.
No, it's not a fact. You're an idiot who doesn't know why the Geneva Conventions work.
I think the
bombing things like churches and mosques. The historic University of Gaza has been destroyed.
Do you agree that a nation has a right to lay siege to its enemy because under international law it does?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have the right to collectively punish them through which they're doing that. They're allowed to siege military targets, but not entire countries. Or not even countries in this case, an occupied territory, technically.
I think we'll have to agree to disagree on this, Kevin.
Okay, but let's go back. We could just conclude on the essential thing I want to ask you about. And by the way, I respect you for your opinions and for what you've done. I don't necessarily agree with your standpoint, but you've made your position very clear. Just try to sum up for us, Amma, just how much trouble Keir Starmer is in over this, because I had an imam on my show a couple of days ago and he said to me, he said, make no mistake, if Keir Starmer doesn't join the calls for a ceasefire, he's in danger of losing all 5 million Muslim votes.
Well, I think it's important to recognise that I think the Muslim vote for Labour has collapsed. There's a survey out recently which showed that 71% of British Muslims would likely have voted for Labour before these events. That's now fallen down to 5%. That's a 66% reduction in the vote. But what I think is important to note is that I don't think this is a Jewish issue or a Muslim issue. This is about human rights. You know, I come from Oxford, and in Oxford now we've had 9 Labour Party councillors resign, the vast majority of whom are not from a Muslim background.
I'm so glad he took this question about, well, what about the Muslims, and said, no, well, obviously the Muslims are upset about this, but this isn't a Muslim versus Jew issue. There are plenty of Jewish people who think that what Israel is doing is completely unconscionable. They were on the street marching with everybody else for a free Palestine, for the cessation of hostilities, for a peaceful solution and a ceasefire, right? This is not a Jew versus Muslim issue. People outside of the Muslim community are just as angry with Keir Starmer as they are. I am one of them. There are plenty of people in my chat who are not Muslims who are just as angry, Jews and Muslims alike. So making this a Muslim issue is completely beyond the pale. It's not the full totality of the issue, rather. And I'm glad that he moved that around now, which is really, really good to see. And actually, most Muslims who are still going to vote say they're going to vote Green based upon that same poll. The Mr. Latif was discussing in the segment that we're watching.
Oxford itself is not particularly, doesn't particularly have a large Muslim background, a large Muslim community. But actually, this is the Labour administration here has now lost the majority within the city council. And I think the reason is that people up and down this country are not happy with the stance that the national leadership has taken. If you look at the polls, over 3/4 of people across the UK would support a ceasefire, and it's really indefensible.
Okay, all right,
he's taking a position like that.
Fair enough.
100%. Just being with where the major population of the country are at, just actually going along with the public consensus on this issue is all we want. It's literally all we want. It's not momentum cranks. It's not the Corbynite wing of the party trying to undermine him. No, we just want them to take the basic position that 78% of this country support.
But I'm a bit worried that people seem to be forgetting what Hamas did 20 days ago, which was grotesque. But
you're very happy to forget everything that's led up to October the 7th, though, aren't you? And apparently to ignore the literal war crimes happening in front of your eyes and just pretending, no war crimes committed here. Didn't happen if I don't say that it did. And just pretend that these things aren't in contravention of international law when they absolutely are. Right? It seems to me, Kevin, the only thing that you can see is what happened on October the 7th, and using that as a justification for as to why every Palestinian child should potentially die, which what shutting off all of the water, food, electricity, fuel, etc. would lead to. Crazy, absolutely crazy. It's just the level to which he just makes stuff up on the fly. I cannot with this guy. He's just an absolute moron. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.